Good evening, I am Ibrahim Sani and you're watching Market Talk. Welcome. The Communications and Multimedia Consumer Forum of Malaysia helps clear the air on consumer matters related to multimedia. They explain new guidelines on registration of prepaid cards, address the issue of false SIM card registration, and generally help consumers to lodge complaints against the necessary authorities. My guest today is Azizan Afendi, the Deputy Chairman of CFM. He was appointed to this role, having previously served as the CFM Council member for 2 terms. He represents Altel Communications Sendirian Berhad, who have joined CFM since 2013 and has been in the communications and multimedia industry for over 17 years. Azizan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ibrahim.
I think last month I had a CMCF come on this very show explaining their roles and functions. And with now having CFM on the show, it becomes a little bit more convoluted. Could you perhaps explain what CFM does and how it correlates between CFM, CMCF, and MCMC, the Kementerian itself?
Sure. MCMC is the regulatory body that has been established under the Act to regulate and to enforce certain provisions of the Communications and Multimedia Act. In the Act, there is a provisions that they can designate a consumer bodies or a forum to address issues on their related matters. So a few bodies has been designated. 2 of them are CMCF and CFM. CMCF is Communications and Multimedia Content Forum of Malaysia, and CFM is the Communications and Multimedia Consumer Forum. So the difference is one is content, one is consumer.
Let's put case study into the picture right now. If somebody harasses someone else on Facebook and basically constitutes to cyberbullying, who do they go to?
Okay, that particular areas or activities is an offence under the Act through under Section 233 of the Communications and Multimedia, misuse of the communication infrastructure. So the MCMC as the regulator has the power to take investigation action and enforcement. But consumer forum, in turn, is required or responsible to educate the customers not to misuse and if they are victims and where they should go, and we do that particular role.
Okay, sorry to have cut you off,
Sure.
but does this mean that they don't need to lodge a report to CFM, they instead would go through CMCF and perhaps even the police for harassment and defamation?
They can go direct to MCMC. In this case, because it does not really at fault of the service providers, where consumer forum has the power over. So consumer can go direct to MCMC to lodge complaints. But CFM, its responsibility is to educate the customers if they are the victim, where they should go. Even before that, if someone intends to do that, then we can tell them that it's not an offence. A lot of the younger generations are practically not aware that what they do can constitute an offence under the Act. So, you cannot simply just post anything using the communication services, whether it's social media or the WhatsApp or the SMS or even call, to undertake those activities. Communication that is offensive, false, menacing, annoying under the Act, then it can constitute an offence.
Okay, so the staple of CFM is, of course, handling consumer complaints, particularly against service providers. In fact, Astro might be one of those other companies that is constituting in the, the companies that people complain against. Yes. Could you explain how the process goes? If I'm unhappy with my service provider for whatever reason, either telco or otherwise, what do they do?
Okay, the complaint process that has been established. Consumer is advised to lodge complaint first to their service providers. If they have problems with Astro, for example, they can lodge first to Astro. Most of the time, the complaints can be resolved. I mean, a lot of the complaints, easy complaints, sometimes the bill is does not reach homes and whatnot. So they can complain to Astro and they can sort it out immediately. Having said that, there's other complaints that might be resolved or customer not still happy with the resolution. The second step, they come to CFM. We will mediate, we help them to resolve complaints, we contacted service providers and discuss on how this matter can be resolved amicably.
The number one complaint that I heard on telcos, against telcos, is that there are drop calls or not enough coverage in terms of their the service.
That is one of the major complaints, but the most complaints received is actually on billing and charging. When involved money, obviously, a lot of people a bit more tentative about it and very careful. So about 37% of the complaints received to date is on charging and billing.
How does the CFM platform work? Who are running the show inside CFM?
The CFM on its own is actually an association registered under the Registrar of Society. The member composition are from the service providers, which is what we call the supply side, and also the demand side, which are the consumer associations, the public interest group, even Institute of Higher Learnings. We have universities that join us as a member. So we sit together and form a association. This association, because of the composition, have connections, links to all the service providers that we can actually discuss issues and complaints pertaining to the consumer.
Does CFM have enforcement powers, or does this enforcement power is transferred to another party?
As an association, we only have so-called powers over our members, and most of the members are the main telcos. You name it, most of them are as our members. So as an association, we can issue notice, warning letters to them to comply with the code that we have published. But if matters is under offence of the law, then the powers is with the authority. We can submit the complaints or the cases to the MCMC for them to take further investigation and enforcement action.
Now, you spoke just now about the code that you guys publish. Does this mean that CFM drafts codes or bylaws that needs to be complied by the multimedia community?
Yes, true. The CFM drafted the codes. That's where it's on the interest of a lot of people to be in the consumer forum, to be able to draft codes to ensure that service provisioning is at a best practice. So the code is registered by MCMC and the compliance to the code is mandatory. So,
all right, Azizan, we'll take a short break, but when we come back, we'll discuss more about the codes that they have been drafting. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Market Talk. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. Today we're discussing CFM and how it relates to your life as a consumer. Just now we covered the position of CFM and what it does and how it relates and correlates to the dimension of SKMM or MCMC and that of CMCF, who I have just interviewed last month. Azizan Muhammad Effendi joins me. He's the Deputy Chairman of CFM. Azizan, we were talking just before we went for the break about the codes that you guys regulate. Right now, there seems to be new guidelines on registration of prepaid cards. First of all, before we go into this, first of all, why just prepaid cards and not postpaid?
Okay, the evolution of mobile service since '98, initially a lot of it are actually on postpaid or what we call a bill, and for that, the service providers on its own take the initiative to ensure registration is accurate as possible because there's element of non-payments, debts, and so forth. So at the end of early 2000, the introduction of prepaid cards where there is no element of non-payment, credit risk, and so forth. So the service providers think that it's not really important to ensure the accuracy or, for that matter, registration. So anyone can just go to the shops and buy and use it, and the intention is that time is just a temporary services, so people just throw it away after a few months of not using it.
All right, so let's speak about the specific new guidelines on prepaid cards.
In 2006, actually the first guideline was issued in 2006 after it becomes more popular and After that, I think about 80% of the mobile service in Malaysia are on prepaid. Then there's a lot of needs to regulate to ensure consumers are protected and there's no misuse of the services. So the MCMC issued a guidelines in 2006 to ensure all service providers register their prepaid service.
And this new guidelines...
This is a revised guideline to further improve the
on
guidelines.
On the 2006 decision.
Yes. In 2006, the difference is at that time, or rather still currently, the guidelines does not require automated capturing of information for registration. That's the main revise of the guidelines. The new ones require service provider to automate the registration process. There are three methods that has been approved, which is biometric, my card reader, or OCR, which is optical character recognition. So the documents used for registration, for example, my card or passport, only using these methods that can be used for registration. It eliminates misspelling, not using documentation for registration, and hence it adapts to the security and accuracy of the registration process.
I don't know what the statistics are, but my hunch is that prepaid cards, there would be a significant or sizable number of them being foreigners or foreign workers. How will these new guidelines impact those kind of registration?
The same applies to all foreigners, be it foreigners on the employment, which is the immigrants that work in Malaysia, or tourists. They come to Malaysia, they use their passport for registration, and that's the same. But for those who work foreigners who work in Malaysia, additional information, for example, where they work, the name of the company and address, and also their place of stay, the address is required to be captured. For tourists, their passports and the location of stay, which is the hotels, usually the hotels, then that is to be captured as well in the registration process.
Okay, and early on in the interview, we spoke about CFM not having enforcement powers. How do you enforce then these new guidelines?
The purpose of us here is to actually educate customers of these changes. So as part of our advocacy responsibility, we tell our customers that 1st January 2018, where the revised guidelines take force, then the consumer, when they want to purchase and register a prepaid card, then they have to go through this process. So later on, it should not be a shock to them that when they go to the shops to buy or to register, then suddenly they have this new process. So we are here as Consumer Forum to educate customers. These are the things that they have to do come 1st January.
It seems that there are more steps now being included, and this would add cost to the telcos. Will these costs be transferred to the consumers?
Definitely not. As you can see on the prices of mobile services for the last few months, for the last few years, it has been dropping. The prices of data, prices of calls, and even SMS now is almost like practically free. A lot of packages offered free SMS, free calls. So these are the normal operational costs. Obviously, there are costs, but these are the operational costs that has to be incurred by the service providers to ensure the service can be provided securely and good for the consumer.
Yeah, it seems that these new regulations are going to impact significantly about how we tag cell phone users, particularly prepaid cell phone users. How serious has the false registration been, and to a point where the telco industry, CFM, and for that matter SKMM, has to do these kind of changes?
In the age of the digital economy, digital technology now, where a lot of activities depends on mobile phones. For example, online banking. You activate it, you receive the transaction authorization code or TAC using your mobile phones. Then it is very important to have a secure and also a dedicated, accurate registration process. That's why it is very important for service providers to ensure your phones, your details are correctly captured. If anything happens to your phones, let's say you lost it and someone get hold of the phones, then you can easily refer to your service providers for replacements with the proper documentation. Without that, it's very difficult. So with that, the requirement for registration accurately and securely is very important.
Okay, we'll take a short break, but when we come back, we'll learn a little bit more about what CFM does, particularly the kind of complaints that they receive. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Market Talk. I'm Ibrahim Sani. Today I have with me Aziza and Muhammad Effendi, the Deputy Chairman of the Communications and Multimedia Consumer Forum. A mouthful, I know, but they are shorthanded as CFM. They operate within the ambit of MCMC or SKMM, the Ministry of Communications and Multimedia. Of course, the bread and butter of CFM is on handling complaints. I want to know more about the details of the kind of complaints that CFM has been receiving thus far.
Okay, for 2006, we received a total number of 7,556 complaints, and bulk of it, or rather 37% of the complaints are on billing and charging, and further 34% is on quality of service. So these two categories are the major issues faced by our consumers that lodge the complaints to us.
Has the number of complaints increased or decreased year on year, or what's the trend like?
It has been increasing for the last few years, but of late the number of increase has been in the smaller percentage as compared to last year. But it is still on the increasing trend. I think particularly because CFM has been going out a lot to educate the customers, and they are be more aware of us, so they come to us for complaints. Before this, not many people or consumers are aware of us, so most of the reasons is because of that.
The telco industry is an extremely interesting sector to look at, because if you're an investor or a business owner, you would like to hedge your bets on the telcos, either in Malaysia or elsewhere around the world, because of the stable nature of the telco companies. However, telco companies, because of the nature of it being in the consumer interface and the fact that they have to provide service 24/7 to the consumers, they bear the brunt towards the anger of consumer satisfaction, or in this case, dissatisfaction. Because of the rising number of complaints that the telcos are receiving, and companies like Astro, for instance, are receiving, does this mean that the service quality rendered by these companies have deteriorated over the years?
Not to us, because the increased number of complaints is predominantly because of the exposure that the current consumer have as compared to before. They are more educated, they know where to go, they know their rights, so they are a bit more educated in that sense. As far as the service is concerned, the mobile service, for example, you can see a lot of improvements in terms of the speed, in terms of the coverage. The 4G services is wonder. You can just download stuff faster. You can stream video. You can do video calls, which we cannot do even like 3-4 years ago. So there's a lot of improvements in terms of the quality. But having said that, there's a lot of still a room for improvements. We understand that, so that's why we go out and tell customers to voice their rights to us, to MCMC, to the service providers on whatever areas that they feel is lacking or unsatisfactory for them.
I think for me as a consumer, and I do use my phone quite heavily, some might say I'm even addicted to it, is that the speed that was promised to consumers like myself is not being fulfilled. When a telco says that they are offering 4G LTE, and I quickly go online and check the internet speed, it doesn't come up to par. And with the 5G, right around the corner, the 5G standards are going to be concurred by the industry, hopefully by 2018. And the rollout of the 5G infrastructure expected to be rolled out in the country by 2018 or 2019. This internet speed are getting faster. Can the telcos keep up with this? Is the infrastructure rendered by the country, by the government, can keep up with the industry standard?
They have to. I mean, they have to keep up with the industry. They have to keep up with the world to ensure that the services provided by the local telcos is at par. This is one of the important areas and that contributes to the economy. So the investors, international investors, look at these facilities before in making their decisions whether Malaysia is a good platform for their investment. The quality of the internet is very complex. It involves location, it involves your devices, it involves where you surf, and also it involves how many people surfing at the same time. But having said that, the telcos, through discussions, through input from the consumers' complaints, for example, suddenly there's a lot of search of complaints in certain areas of inequality, then this information can be channeled to them for them to zoom in further what is the problem in that area. So to answer your questions in terms of this quality, it will keep on increasing. For example, recently MCMC issued a tender for the 700 MHz spectrum. This additional spectrum will value add to the channel of the broadband quality, mobile broadband quality, which in turn will benefit the consumer.
And one final question before we go off. Would there be a conflict of interest by having telcos inside the council member of CFM, particularly when they receive these complaints to CFM? Would there be incidences of suppression of complaints that will float up to the necessary authorities?
No, the answer is no. But the spirit of the Consumer Communications and Multimedia Act, in certain areas, they call it self-regulation, where the service providers is tasked to also self-regulate themselves. And the platform, one of the platform is Consumer Forum, where they come into CFM, drafted the codes on the best practice platform to ensure that the consumers are protected. It is also actually in the best interest of the telcos to deliver the best services. The competition is very stiff. Those that cannot cope up and those that cannot deliver good services will be left behind. So having telcos in CFM is at the advantage of both parties, the Consumer Forum as well as the telco. The Consumer Forum having a direct connection to the telcos to be able to resolve issues, to get inputs from them, and telcos will get first-hand insight of what consumers are saying to the Consumer Forum.
How can consumers reach out to CFM and tell all their stories and all their complaints?
Obviously, we have all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and whatnot. But if on complaints, they can call us at 1-800-182222, and they can also email us at aduan@cfm.org.my. There's a portal that they can log in for complaints, which is aduan.cmc.gov.my. It's an integrated platform for CFM as well as MCMC to lodge complaints.
Right, Effendi, thank you very much for joining me this evening. I've been speaking to Azizan Muhammad Effendi, the Deputy Chairman of the Communications and Multimedia Consumer Forum, or CFM for short. And that wraps up this episode of Market Talk. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at 501 Awani. Download our app on the Google Play and the Apple App Store. And don't forget, you can listen to this interview on your podcast. Simply search for Market Talk or Astro Awani wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Ibrahim Sani. Thanks for watching and goodbye.